Jack was one of those people who listened and observed as well as he wrote and performed. When Jack and I first began performing together in 1956, we would run across one another at bring your own bottle parties, often held at painters' lofts. The guests would bring wine, beer, Dr. Brown's black cherry soda, sometimes just paper cups or potato chips, graham crackers, or a musical instrument, a new poem, a song, a monologue from Shakespeare, or Lord Buckley's latest comedic philosophic rap, or perhaps their unadorned selves looking for romance, fun, excitement, and a chance to celebrate Friday and Saturday night when you could stay up till dawn because you didn't have to go to your day job the next day. This was the New York where Jack and I each felt most at home, an environment that was inclusive, informal, almost rural, temporarily created for a few hours in the midst of a vast skyscrapered metropolis, where we miraculously found temporary cocoons of warmth and camaraderie. These party environments were just like back porch Lugenbach, Texas, picking parties in the summer, or Lowell, Massachusetts gets-togethers over beer with Acadian accordions and singing of old songs, or the pubs of Dublin, Ireland, where unheralded natural poets celebrated the rising of the moon, or great jam sessions in the South, just like the ones with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie in my basement apartment in 1952 in Washington, D.C., before I met Jack. These informal, spontaneous gatherings were like magic. Years later, Jack talked about these New York all-night weekend bashes that we shared. But when he and I first performed together, we hardly said a word to each other. Just as I was blessed to play with Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis, Bud Powell, Oscar Pettiford, and scores of other great musicians who never said much and let their music do the talking. Jack and I had that same musician's ESP. It was an unspoken communication that came to us naturally. I would play while he read or improvised words, and I knew exactly what to do. We both knew how to listen, to lay back, to breathe together, to curb aggression and search for harmony, to tune into one another and surrender ourselves to the particular rhythm and pulse of the evening. That rhythm and pulse was always connected to the Native American drum we both felt so strongly. The African drum that permeated all the great music of our time, the drum of the Middle East, and the soulful songs, stories, prayers, and chants of the Catholic Church that Jack had in his bones, and the Jewish liturgical wailing of ancient songs that reverberated in my unconscious. Soon as we were done performing, we would give each other a wink, a nod, or a smile, and become part of the party, flirting with young women and searching for food, drink, and adventure. Several months after we had crossed paths many times, my weekend excursions to these parties temporarily came to a halt, and I began an 11-week-long stint with my quartet at the Five Spot, a funky bar in the Bowery that became the hangout for painters like Franz Klein, Wilhelm de Kooning, Joan Mitchell, Alfred Leslie, who later directed the film Pull My Daisy that Jack and I collaborated on, and Larry Rivers, who appeared in Pull My Daisy as a saxophone-playing railroad train conductor modeled after Neil Cassidy. The Five Spot welcomed everyone, artists, moving men, postal workers, winos, office workers, and off-duty firemen. You could get a huge picture of beer for just 75 cents. My quartet was sometimes joined by as many as 18 musicians on the night when the whole Woody Band came and sat in with us. Late at night, poets and actors would sometimes join us reciting poetry or improvising verse with music. This was never planned. Our era was always inclusive, not exclusive. Jazz was about sharing and spontaneity. Jack was often there, and all of us in the quartet would always feel his presence the minute he arrived. We could telepathically feel his power as a listener, just as we could feel his ability to observe reflected in his dark, brooding eyes. I remembered our great encounters at the weekend loft parties where we played together. On the Road was not yet published, and the terrible pressures of celebrity were still to come. Even though he often sat alone like a wayward, meditative Canadian lumberjack in his plaid red checkered work shirt, he always exuded a special energy. He was that one special person Mingus had alluded to, the one we always knew we could play for. We began to know one another as two fellow transplanted hicks, trying to relate to Golgothian New York City. Jack was from Lowell, Massachusetts, and I was brought up on a farm in Feasterville, Pennsylvania. Even though we both had seen a lot of the world, we still had the bond of being outsiders in New York City. Like so many of our friends, we were looked upon as offbeat characters, searching for hidden treasures that we knew we would find in our everyday lives if we left ourselves open to appreciate everything that surrounded us. Jack told me how being a football player had opened up the doors for him to leave Lowell, go to an Eastern prep school, and be accepted at Columbia University. And I told Jack about my childhood growing up on a farm in Feasterville, Pennsylvania, always dreaming of becoming a musician. I described the trauma of moving to Washington, D.C. at the age of 12 and deciding to become a musician and composer, the joy of my job as a part-time gym teacher at a French school, then being drafted into the Army and beginning my travels around the world. We found we shared a mutual interest in sports and speaking fractured French, which often annoyed the 4 a.m. stoned-out customers at Bickford's Greasy Spoon in New York City, where we would congregate after the five-spot close to eat hamburgers with fried onions and mayonnaise on English muffins while we drank coffee and planned our conquest of New York. A few months after my 11-week engagement at the five-spot was over, poet and drummer Howard Hart and San Francisco poet Philip Lamantia climbed up the 6 flights of stairs to my tiny apartment on Christopher Street, which was always open to guests, and told me of their idea to give a jazz poetry reading in New York City. "It will be the first one," said Howard Hart in his hyper-breathless style. "Jack said he'd do it with us. He'll be the MC. And you and he can do all that spontaneous stuff where you both make up rhymed scat verses and accompany each other. And Philip and I will read from poems that we've written out. We'll give you carbon copies for our poems to look at. We can even rehearse. But I know you and Jack don't need to. You guys already can do it naturally better than anyone else." When I read some typed copies of Howard's and Philip's poems, which Howard had brought with him, I understood why Jack wanted to do a planned reading with them. Their poems were lyrical, original, honest, touching, with brilliant flights of fancy, combined with contemporary sounds of everyday urban life. "Well, where and when are we going to do it? And with when?" I said. I don't know if I'll have much time to rehearse. I'm writing for Joe Papp's Free Shakespeare in the Park, working part-time in the post office, playing with my band, and composing music too. I've always played with Jack spontaneously without ever planning anything. "Don't worry," said Howard. "It will happen when and where it's supposed to happen, and we'll all be there together." Well, the next day, we met with Jack at my 6th floor walk-up. I could hear Jack bellowing as he climbed the stairs. Merde alors, said Jack in French. I've ascended the cherubic heights to join the lonely bell ringer in the up tower of St. Amram's synagogue. Get an elevator, Davy. Those 6 flights will be responsible for your premature demise. À la santé and l'chaim. Jack pulled a bottle of Thunderbird wine from his red-checked lumber jacket, removed it from its soiled brown paper bag, and took an enormous gulp. We'll make history, Davy. The mad poets and sainted musicians will make New York City become the new international shrine for Buddha-like meditation. All the jaded big city Philistines will smile at one another as we lay our scatological tunes on their weary souls. Let's play something for Philip and Howard to show these boys how Baudelaire and Eric Satie are reborn in Greenwich Village. I began playing the 12-bar blues. Jack and I made up verses, played and scat-sang 4-bar breaks, while Howard took a pair of wire brushes from his jacket and played drum parts on a phone book. Philip Lamantia watched all this in amazement. My God, Jack, I wish everyone here in San Francisco could see this. I didn't know you could sing. I can't, said Jack. That's the voice of the Holy Spirit coming through me. Like Stravinsky said about composing Sacre du Printemps, I'm merely the vessel through which this new creation was given to the world. Well, I see New York's helping you to overcome your shyness and modesty, said Philip, laughing. Ah, I'm serious, man, said Jack. When Davy and I start cooking, I feel like I'm flying, like Charlie Parker, a bird in flight. He didn't talk about it, he did it. We'll do it, said Howard. I'll drink to that, said Jack. Let's get some more wine and go out to the Cafe Figaro and meet some beautiful girls. And we'll discuss our plans to invade New York's literary jungle and overwhelm the masses with our spontaneous madness. We ambled down the 6 flights of stairs and headed towards the Cafe Figaro. We walked in silence for a few blocks. Jack turned to me as we crossed the street to Sheridan Square. Did you ever feel you knew someone your whole life when you met them? Yeah, Jack. I felt that with you the first time we played together at one of those loft parties, but I never would have said it. You didn't need to say it, said Jack. We walked to the Figaro and sat in the back room. I took out my horn and we gave an improvised performance. Brooklyn Bernie, an old Greenwich Village moving man, applauded and came over to our table. I'll tell you what, Dave. I'll buy all you guys free coffee, sandwiches, and pastry if you'll let me recite the rhyme of the ancient mariner for you, all right? Listen, Dave, you play the horn like a sea sound's making a boat rock, and you other guys hum when I signal you. I always wanted to do this at the Figaro. Now this is my chance. Then he whispered confidentially, there's a bunch of beautiful young ladies from Barnard College and Mount Holyoke College for Women sitting up in the front 2 tables by the window. They're here to meet some real bohemian artists. What you guys are doing, no offense, but it's too weird. It's too far out. But when they hear me do the rhyme of the ancient mariner, they'll flip out. And I'll buy you all whatever you want. I accept your kind offer, said Philip Lamantia. I'll have the apple turnover, a double espresso, and a salmon platter. I'll have the same, said Howard Hart. I'm not hungry, I'm thirsty, said Jack. I'll take a sip of whatever holy spirits are in that bottle that I see in the side pocket of your coat. I'm starving, Bernie, I said. I'll have the vegetarian special plate, a tuna roll, a cappuccino, a toasted bagel with lox, onions, and cream cheese, with a side order of coleslaw and French fries. Brooklyn Bernie, the moving man, ordered us our feast. After we chowed down, Jack and I did a few impromptu numbers, punctuated by Jack taking loud slurps of wild turkey whiskey from Brooklyn Bernie's brown bagged bottle, before launching into his next improvised story song poem. Jack sat down and attacked my remaining coleslaw and French fries. Brooklyn Bernie took a huge belt from his near-empty bottle of wild turkey, cleared his throat, and climbed up on the top of his chair, waving his arms to let the patrons of the Café Figaro know that it was showtime. The denizens of the Café Figaro were used to unannounced performances by anyone who felt like giving impromptu readings of their latest poems, monologues from Shakespeare or Chekhov, ranting and raving about world politics, or delivering homemade public service announcements requesting for a place to stay for the night. Brooklyn Bernie clapped his hands, gestured like a crazed symphony conductor from his chair podium for quiet, and launched into a raspy-voiced version of the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. He gave Howard, Philip, and myself signals to accompany him with sound effects suggesting the sea, but his ship was sinking rapidly. No one paid any attention. The customers began talking to each other, gradually drowning him out. He was receiving the fabled New York freeze. Soon, many of them turned their chairs so that gradually Bernie could see a room filled with people whose backs were turned towards him. "He's like Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man," whispered Howard. "No one knows he's here." Brooklyn Bernie concluded and was rewarded by withering silence and cold stares of contempt. We could feel his despair. Jack leapt up and started singing Pennies from Heaven, interspersing Bernie from Brooklyn into the lyrics while I accompanied him. Jack made up a whole song about Brooklyn Bernie coming through the rain to make Manhattan his new home, and what a moving man this moving man was. At the end, the whole Figaro crowd burst into applause and laughter, and one of the women from the table full of intellectual lovelies invited us to join them. We were asked to go with them to a friend's loft where we partied till dawn. Brooklyn Bernie was in heaven and was having an elated conversation with a gorgeous philosophy major, which was prematurely terminated when he passed out in the armchair that he was emoting from. There was an old upright piano in their loft, and Jack played his particular style of crashing Beethoven-esque chords while I was scat singing. I backed him up when he sang, spoke, or scatted, and we traded rhyme verses together with Jack playing the bongos. His natural musicality and style of poetic speaking was extraordinary, and the young women were transformed to see someone who looked more like Paul Bunyan than a tortured, introspective poet emoting streams of dialogue, stories, songs, and poetry, all of which made sense. That night, we knew we could do anything, anywhere, for anybody, and the people who were there with us would no longer be the traditional passive audience. All of us would feel part of one another, sharing in the moment, knowing it would never happen in the same way again. Howard Hart and Philip Lamattia got up and read their poems, accompanied by Brooklyn Bernie's snores, my French horn, and at times the old upright piano I played. Their performance, like their poetry, was powerful, lyrical, intense, severe, sincere, and disciplined. Their formality fit perfectly with the totally spontaneous moments that Jack and I had created earlier in the evening. That night in the spring of 1957, Philip, Howard, Jack, and I gave what later became the basis for the first ever jazz poetry reading given in New York City. Finally, the sun came up, and the gorgeous philosophy major, Helen, put on Afghan blanket over Brooklyn Bernie's slumbering hulk, listening to his loud snores as we ate an omelet of hot dogs, mushrooms, Swiss cheese, canned peas, olives, and strawberry yogurt that I whipped up as a culinary thank you bouquet to our hostesses for allowing us to have what became the only rehearsal we ever had for our future public performances. Although, of course, we didn't know that at the time. I staggered home, slowly climbing the 6 flights of stairs, and collapsed into an early morning 8 a.m. slumber. At noon, there was a loud pounding on my door. Howard Hart, knowing it was never locked, burst into the room. "My God, man, what a night! I've got a terrible hangover, but we've got to be at the Museum of Modern Art in an hour. I called Frank O'Hara, and he made an appointment to see the events coordinator at 1:30 this afternoon. He's going to try to get us a jazz poetry reading at the museum this fall. We're already storming the Bastille of uptown uptightness in the Big Apple. Jack's still sleeping, so we'll meet Frank O'Hara and Philip at 85 minutes. Get dressed. Hurry up. Wear anything." I threw on my old gray sweater, no socks, mismatching sneakers, and paint-stained jeans. "I hope I look okay," I said. "You're fine," said Howard. "Frank O'Hara will take care of everything. He's going to make history. We're going to make history. Roll over, Picasso. Frank O'Hara's going to let us play the Museum of Modern Art Jazz Poetry Blues." Frank O'Hara was a highly respected person in the uptown world and was established as an important figure in New York's cultural life. Aside from his gifts as a poet, he was much beloved by all of us and acknowledged as a link to the burgeoning community of artists, poets, painters, musicians, and friends who later became known, or some of us did through no effort of our own part, as the founding members of the Beat Generation, a term most of us had never heard of at that time. We got to the museum 2 minutes early, gave Frank O'Hara and Philip Lamantia a hug, and were escorted into the event coordinator's plush office. The men in charge of performance events at the museum listened patiently as Frank O'Hara extolled the virtues of Howard Hart, Philip Lamantia, Jack Kerouac, and myself. I noticed the events coordinator was wearing an elegant crushed velvet jacket and smoked French Gitan cigarettes from a long ivory cigarette holder. He was wearing patent leather shoes. He eyed my sockless, mismatched sneakers and grimaced. After a glowing report of a half an hour, I thought Frank O'Hara's recommendation of our list of achievements would make us candidates for the Nobel Peace Prize. "Frank, let's be brutally honest," said the events coordinator. "These two poets and Amram are just about totally unknown outside of the downtown bohemian circles. The Museum of Modern Art is not a talent show for hopefully emerging artists. We have an international reputation to uphold. And that Jack Kerouac, I've met him at the Cedar Tavern. He acts like a truck driver. He's a total unknown and so gauche. We would never have someone so crude appear at one of our events. I didn't even know he was a writer. I can't believe Viking is going to publish a novel of his this fall. Do you think he wrote it himself?" Philip looked dismayed. Howard looked at me despairingly. "Let's split," he murmured. We walked towards the exit of the museum. Well, what will we tell Jack?" said Philip in a glum tone. "He'll roar with laughter," said Frank O'Hara, "especially the part of him looking like a truck driver and not being able to write a book. Jack's all written already written 11 books. The town and the city was marvelous, even though my colleagues here at the museum refused to read it because it never made the bestseller list. Don't despair. When my colleague loses his job as the events coordinator at the Museum of Modern Art and is selling lingerie somewhere, all of you will be scaling the heights and opening the doors to new vistas. Do it downtown, where you're already loved. It was a mistake for me to try to break down the walls of pretension here at the museum. When you get better known, they'll fawn and grovel all over all of you. At least until you fall out of fashion. Do it downtown. Let's try the Brada Art Gallery on East 10th Street. You've already played for their art openings, David. The artists all remember you from your stint this past winter at the Five Spot with your quartet. They know your scores for Free Shakespeare in the Park. You just started composing and they've heard you with Mingus. They trust my judgment on the value of your poetry, Howard and Philip, and they'll love Jack and sense that he's a genius, as we all do. Let's do it downtown. Je m'en fous, Davy, said Jack. Let's go hang out in the village and épater la bourgeoisie. This may be the holy night that you find the dream wife, life companion you search for on your musicological field trips through the lonely streets of Oldie Manhattanos. That was Jack's affectionate nickname for downtown New York. You need to find a soulmate. You can write symphonies and cook omelets for her. I don't need to look anymore. I'm cool, Dave. I have sweet Joyce, the finest woman on earth. We should both get married tonight at City Hall and celebrate with a champagne dinner at your Mount Everest walk-up Himalayan high cabin in the sky on Christopher Street. We could serenade our new young wives with our Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Lester Young, Thelonious Monk, Bartok, Kerouacian-inspired soulful ditties. I grabbed my French horn. Jack packed up his notebooks, and we strolled through Greenwich Village. I sat in with Art Blakey's band at a nearby jazz club for a set, and then we wandered over to the Café Figaro. Brooklyn Bernie, the moving man, wearing the same clothes he'd had on when we left him snoring earlier in the same day, greeted us with his loud, raspy voice. Jack, Dave, let's do the rhyme of the ancient mariner again. The manager of the Figaro came over immediately. Listen, Bernie, no offense, but you almost emptied the house last night. I'll buy you all supper if you'll promise to keep quiet. Face it, Bernie, the rhyme of the ancient mariner doesn't go over with the weekend crowd. Let Jack and Dave do their spontaneous stuff. New York's a tough town. Stick to moving furniture. Brooklyn Bernie looked crestfallen. Well, let Bernie play the bongo drums and accompany us with his highly evolved moving man rhythms, said Jack graciously. The manager handed Bernie the house set of bongos. Jack made up a new version of Brooklyn Bernie, the moving man, a moving man. Everyone in the Figaro was snapping their fingers and singing along in a rhyme choral refrain I made up from Jack's words. Thank you, Jack, said Bernie. After the 25-minute improvised tribute celebrating Bernie, his native Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and Hart Crane on the Brooklyn Bridge. As everyone applauded, Jack lifted Bernie's hands up as if he were the new heavyweight champion of the world. Bernie was beaming. Jack, he said, you're a genius, generous soul. You're what we call in Yiddish a real mensch. You got a lot of neshama. That means soul, man. Merci, said Jack. I come from soul people. The Kerouacs have been on a long journey since the 12th century in France, Canada, and now in the U.S., and I feel reverberations of the same lost memories of Iroquois ancestors in my blood everywhere I go. I have dreams about them. I've never lost. Jesus and St. Francis and Buddha guide me on my journey, and you, Bernie, are the reincarnation of the ancient mariner, a landlubber trapped in a port of call. You're in dry dock on a pier crowded with Philistines. But despair not, Bernie. I have the sacred wine to anoint your tortured soul. Jack pulled out a fresh bottle of Thunderbird wine, and we surreptitiously poured it into coffee cups and drank it all. Bernie staggered off to take the subway back to Brooklyn, and Jack and I went up to my apartment and played music and talked till dawn. He told me stories about his travels and how we could someday create a band of musicians from all over the world and combine them with a symphony orchestra. How we could write a huge piece like the Berlioz Requiem for chorus, band, and orchestra and tour the world, inviting local poets and jazz and folk players to join us at each concert. We would give our special guests, the poets and jazz musicians, a special 10 minutes when we could all improvise while the symphony orchestra players watched us on stage from behind their music stands. We can open up the doors, the minds and the hearts of everybody, said Jack. Music and words are all part of the same cloth. Like yin and yang, they give the perfect balance to existence, the perfect duality. A few months later, in early October of 1957, Howard, Philip, Jack, and I gave the first ever jazz poetry reading in New York City at the Brada Art Gallery on East 10th Street. It was an event that Frank O'Hara had helped us to organize. There were no posters and no advertising, just a mimeographed, handwritten handbill that we handed out at the Cedar Tavern, the Five Spot, the Cafe Figaro, the Kettle of Fish, the White Horse Tavern, and San Remo's. The Brada was packed. We did what we had done before at parties, park benches, and friends' houses. We had no idea if anyone would even come or if they would like it. Philip reminded me in 2001, when we had a reunion in San Francisco, that 44 years earlier we had said a communal prayer before walking over to the Brada Gallery for our great adventure. Philip, Howard, and Jack used to take me to Mass in the village, so we were used to praying together. The reading turned out to be memorable. We didn't know it at the time, but the seeds were sown. Shortly after our Brada performance, Jack was offered the chance to play at the Village Vanguard on December 19th and get paid. He called me from Florida, full of excitement. I'm joining the pantheon of the great souls of jazz who burn like Charlie Parker with a heart and gem like flame, he said, paraphrasing Walter Pater's motto that we always use to energize each other. After a disastrous week at the Vanguard, he was terminated. I wasn't able to be there to cheer him up and make him know that every word he spoke or read would be treasured. The musicians who were at the Vanguard, meeting Jack for the first time in that tiny dressing room, didn't know what he was capable of doing. They weren't aware of his musical gifts or the extent of his love and knowledge of music. One of the bartenders told me that when Jack felt a freeze from the musicians backstage, he drank so much he wasn't able to show the audience or the musicians what he was capable of. He was such a beautiful cat, said the bartender. The musicians who squeezed in and out of that telephone booth they called the dressing room saw this guy who looked like a dock worker or a moving man wearing a necktie and carrying a bunch of papers on a little notebook. Only musicians were allowed to go back into that tiny room. That was the inner sanctum for musicians only and their old ladies and closest friends. When Jack walked in unannounced in the back room, J.J. Johnson and his band thought someone had wandered in off the street, and they all gave Jack the freeze. J.J. Johnson would have flipped out if he'd known that Jack was able to sing J.J.'s recorded trombone solos on those records that he'd made with Charlie Parker. Jack was too shy to say anything to either J.J. or the cats in J.J.'s band. You should have been there. He needed to have someone with him. he knew that was on his side to introduce him to everybody. I heard him carry on with you for hours at different loft parties when you jammed out together and when he'd sit in with you and your band at the Five Spot. He was fantastic when he was feeling right. This was the first time he'd ever performed at a club as a featured performer. The pressure got to him. He couldn't handle it. I've seen seasoned cats who've been playing for years crack under the pressure of playing for the first time in New York as a headliner. You got to have someone in your corner. He didn't have anybody back there with him to cool out the scene. He was lost. And next week, we're going to continue with the book describing the first ever jazz poetry reading that we did at the Circle in the Square and our continued adventures in New York. We really want to thank you. And now I'd like to, if I may, please introduce two amazing people who have made this possible with the hopes that this will encourage other writers and musicians not only to collaborate, but anybody and everybody to use the magic of the internet to put out something that they would like to share. And these two people are, and I hope I pronounced their names correctly, Pamela, who is the person who read Offbeat and said this should be eventually a book, audio book. And she is a very accomplished actress, screenwriter, and I was thrilled that she was interested. And her partner in Eclat Creative, they have a little spontaneous company that they made named Anthony de Marbier, who is extraordinary not only as a musician, actor, improviser, but also as a technological genius, taking someone who's about to turn 90 years old, being able to somehow do this with aplomb. And they're going to mention the intermission that we have and describe what we're going to do next week with the first of our series of special guests. And thank you all for being here, and hope this inspires you to be creative and express yourself and tell your kids and everyone to do the same thing, because we're all born artists until we're talked out of it. Please welcome Pamela and Anthony de Marbier.
Thanks for that stellar introduction, David. That was very awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this really, really unique journey. This is something that hasn't, to my knowledge, ever been really attempted before. So in a way, all of you are also a part of history here, because we're recording the audio, or at least most of the audio for the audiobook, which will eventually be released, and you can say that you were here on the first day. I'm not sure where Pamela went off to, but Pamela, are you there by any chance? May have lost her for a second. So for the next 15 minutes. Oh, is she?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Oh, there she is. Oh, there we go.
Hello, hi David. I don't know, somehow I'm only seeing me, not everybody now. Can you see me?
Yes, yes.
Doug, hello, I can hear your voice. So I'm so excited to be on this call. And when I was looking at the viewers, I fell in love and I saw this face. And guess what? I texted James Canary because he's on. And yes, it is Joyce Johnson. Joyce Johnson, if you're there, I have to tell you something. I love your biography on Jack Kerouac and the gentleness and the nuance that you portrayed and the real love and love of spirit. I just love you for having read your book. Maybe on the 4th week or so. So I'm so happy to see you. We have Jim, I saw him on. He said, James, the Wizard of the Scroll is here. And quickly one day I was at Beyond Baroque and I walked in because I was going to pull My Daisy. That's in Venice, California. And I see this bright light spirit and I say, do I know you? And the spirit said to me, do I know you? and that was David Amram. And he was in town from New York to do Pull My Daisy. And that's where I discovered the book Offbeat, which is an extraordinary in and of itself play and life event. And one day talking on the phone, David was reading to me from his new book, and I felt so special, so privileged, and so guilty to be the only one hearing it. So that's where the idea started to do the book on tape, and brought Anthony in, who's so technically wonderful, and got David up to speed. And we're so happy to be here on show one. Love you, David.
Thank
And
you.
a really quick shout out to Mr. Doug Yeager, who is also one of the producers and David's manager, and an amazing person who definitely deserves a little shout out and hello to.
Hello. And Anthony, I did send you that current link.
Amazing. So everybody, so for intermission, we are going to have a little treat. We are going to have a 13-minute video of Pull My Daisy from the E-Town webisode series. And after that, we are going to open up the floor to some Q&A, so that way we can have a little talk back with David, and you guys can ask him any question that you want. Just not a social security number, because I already asked him that one.
Anthony, could I say one unexpected thing?
Absolutely.
Oh, one of the people that I saw, amazingly, because I thought he might be packed, and I saw his name, so I know he's there, is Dr. Nelson Harrison, a great trombone player, great musician, and I wrote Nelson a letter, which I said I was going to read to him on the program, but I was so busy doing everything else that I didn't get a chance, and he can, of course, speak later on, but if I can just read the letter, then I won't have to do it later on. It's real short, and then I'll be quiet. It's, Dear Nelson, great to hear from you, and I'm so happy that you can see my show. I'm reading this note to you on the second half, actually it's the first half of the first week of the new show, to thank you for tuning in with the hopes that people will read your amazing web information about the music we call jazz, which was such an important part of the lives of so many of us, in addition to Kerouac and myself, and has survived all obstacles to become truly classical in its own right. Just like your play, you and I can set an example to self-proclaimed cultural anthropologists and intellectual giants that, contrary to the efforts to brand us as inarticulate morons because we spend our lives trying to create music, therefore we are incapable of expressing ourselves in words. I remember all the times when I first came to New York in 1955 and was told, I'm not interested in your opinions. Talk through your horn. During the Q&A after the readings and intermission video, I want to give you the shout out so that the viewers can take a look at your amazing university achievement and excellence and see all that you have done through the magic of the internet and they themselves can check out either Dr. Nelson Harrison or Cyberaxis at Verizon.com. That's Cyberaxis at Verizon.com, as I do every week. I'll also mention Jazz on the Tube, which includes many of the USA's masters of the past as well as the present, and the contributors and avatars of Afro-Cuban and all Caribbean musics, and how New Orleans, as a partner in musical exchanges since the 19th century, continues to enrich the world, as well as the contributions of cities like Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Chicago, Indianapolis, all of whom remain part of the great music's evolution. And how the ever-changing, spontaneous classical music that we call jazz not only continues to change the mindset of our country, but also to make us aware of the lasting beauty of the European masters. Now, 2020, for Charlie Parker's 100th birthday, and the discovery of Thelonious Monk as a composer, Bach is always mentioned. And students at conservatories are made aware that Chopin was known and supported himself during his lifetime as an improviser and found it hard to actually grind out a piece for others to play with pen and ink. Thank heavens that he did. Thank heavens that Duke Ellington did. So an awareness that jazz is a major art form and hopefully will avoid becoming incarcerated in the gloomy prisons of academia means that celebrating the neighborhoods and the people and the cultures from whence the music came can be a first step towards respect and understanding the beauty part of our culture. People are eager to know anything about what is nutritious besides the jive-ass New Age hustlers who guarantee eternal health and beauty if you click on an infomercial followed by a sales pitch and an order form with a 30-day money-back guarantee. But as you know, anything spiritual, cultural, or anything of intellectual value is based on years, often centuries of millenniums of studying the tireless work, sharing history of those who created it, and this knowledge provides the roots for each generation to add to that great gumbo pot of nutrition. After we played all day for his 70th birthday celebration at Wolf Trap back in 1987, Dizzy Gillespie told me about the New Orleans concept of the gumbo pot of nutrition in a late night, early morning session around 4 a.m. He said, I remember meeting you back in 1951 at your basement apartment. You were a hayseed hick kid. Now you've got gray hair. It's time to put something back into the pot. That's what we're all supposed to do. We all put our own special ingredient, and then we partake from that stew. We become nutrified. That's what I hope my weekly show can do, not only honor all those in addition to Kerouac, who I was still am lucky enough to get to know, and in exchange for their life experiences, what I learned from others. This way I can be of some use to a 24-year-old person who's told by their career counselor that they're washed up at 24 because they're too old. They're often told that demographics proves that there's no market for their efforts and not to bother to pursue what they feel they were put here to do. My hope is that when they see someone who's grateful and still happy to do what they love to do, who's about to turn 90, they might say to themselves, even though my career counselor is a brilliant person, if that old guy seems to be enjoying what he's doing, maybe I'll give it 2 more years anyway. If that happens even one time, then I felt I have put something back into the pot. And since you've been doing that all your life, Nelson, I hope all the viewers of this show can visit you online, if not in person, and see why you remind all of us that the jazz luminaries from your hometown of Pittsburgh is why it's called the land of the giant killers. Thank you for your great work, David, promising young composer. And now I'll turn the show back to you guys, and thank you, Nelson, and thank you all for letting me read that. Do I?
Nope, just once.
The wastebasket and the eraser are terrific. It's no crime in doing something that's not that fabulous and then getting up and doing it again. So if you're trying to improvise or you're trying to create or write or paint or do anything, just the fact of trying to do it and doing it with other people is worth the journey, because you're elevating yourself from getting out of the chair. And if you get around people that love what they're doing, whether you're studying carpentry or cooking or anything, you can get better. And those really good people will always show you how to make those onions simmer just at the right direction before you put the next part in, and then make a soup that's really good. Well, here we are in Boulder, Colorado in the year 2015 on such a beautiful night. And while the rest of the country may have snow and ice, here the sun and the stars are shining bright. And the E-Town light that is spreading right here at the moment and always on the air is something that shows that music and poetry and art is something that all of us can share. Now, Nick Foster, when I met him back in 1980, he was playing with Hot Rize in the middle of the night. I never dreamed that all these years later, we'd be here having so much fun and getting everything right. So I can only say thank you to the great jam session creator in the sky for making it possible today to be here and do things in that very, very, very special E-Town way, where what comes before and what comes after is determined by celebrating the magic of now at the moment right here. And that whatever you do, wherever you've been, we have to spread and share a little good cheer. So without further ado for all of you, since I don't want that introduction to be too long and tire out everybody before they even get a chance to listen to what was the original song, I can only say that really doing this doesn't mean that I'm certifiably crazy. I'm just inspired by E-Town and Boulder, Colorado in this special version of Pull My Daisy. Pull my daisy, tip my cup. All my doors are open. Hop my hot for coconuts. All my eggs are broken. Hop my heart song, harp my life. Seraphs hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my life. Lay it on the needy. Hop my heart song, harp my life. Seraphs hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my life. Lay it on the needy. Well, when Jack and Neil and Alan and I wrote this song way back in 1959, never thought on this beautiful February evening in 2015 I'd feel so fine to share a little moment with you. We hope when the song is through, you'll go home and create something yourself or put those self-help videos on someone else's shelf just to naturally take your own creativity, because we're all born with that as well as a little spontaneity. Now you all know that, or you probably wouldn't be living here or wouldn't be listening to what we're doing tonight. But it bears repeating, cause it's truthful and it's right. So without a further ado, I've got a special treat for you. He's not only a master of bluegrass as well, but he's really got a story to tell. Mr. Nick Foster, playing his guitar. He couldn't have made it any more beautiful or any softer, because it was just perfect, you know, just the way the music should go. Well, let's not forget the amazing grace that always brings a smile on everybody's face, because when he plays his bass for you, he'll show the gracefulness is really through. There's not too much more that I've got to say. We're going to have a little virtuoso playing from day. Woo! believe it was Charles Dickens who said that's some hellacious bass picking. And if he didn't say it, he should have said it, because that's revisionist history at its best. So I'm going to play a little solo for you, even though I didn't have a request. I couldn't fit my French horn and overhead baggage, but my penny whistles are portable, don't you know? So I'm going to play a little penny whistle solo. Tip my cup, hop my heart for coconuts. You could ask what's up. Pip my angel harp, my light. Spread it on the needy. Just remember, if you're in E-Town, don't ever be greedy. You can make up the own lyrics yourself. Whether you're here or on the island of Guelph, just tap into your spontaneity. You can do it so easily, don't you see? That's the way Jack Kerouac knew way back, heard people scat singing in 5 Points, Colorado, and Denver in 1943. Actually, it was 1947, but we don't want to get too particular or accurate, because otherwise we might think that they're going to be disturbed if I made a mistake and they're up there checking it out on E-Town broadcast up in heaven. But the music always tells the story. So when Jack Kerouac, actually back in 1953, was still in his football glory, but after his great athletic skills and thrills and his A average as an English literature student, his father, who only spoke French to him at home, said, Jackie, mon cher, si tu restes ici toute la vie, alors, sûrement tu es obligé un jour à travailler comme ta mère toute la vie dans une factory. Which means, man, you better get out of town or you're going to end up working in a factory like your mother has done all of your life. And you won't even get started before it's through. So Jack, using his football skills and scholarship, went to prestigious Horace Mann in New York City and graduated so well that he got a scholarship into prestigious Ivy League covered Columbia U. And Lou Little, the great coach, had hopes for him, but the second week of practice, Jack broke his leg. And like Lou Little himself, who was such a great coach, Jack, with his Franco-American background, was too proud to grovel and beg. So he split the scene, and after writing the 10th version of On the Road in 1951, in 3 weeks, not taking Benzedrine and getting stoned, but simply revising what he'd already been writing for years in a little masterpiece, which suddenly came out years later on the scroll. It took 6 years of rejection and no inspection, but it didn't really take its toll. And finally, September 7th of 1957, Gilbert Milstein, the third critic who realized that Dostoevsky, Jack Kerouac, Charles Dickens, Charlie Parker, Bela Bartok, Franz Klein, Rembrandt, and all the members of the band here tonight at E-Town all have something in common, which is beautiful dedication and soulfulness and excellence of execution every day. Gave it an incredibly great review and blew all the critics and the literature of New York City's quality lit set forever away. So now, all these years later, for everyone here in Boulder, Colorado tonight, whether you want to sing, paint, play, act, or even try to write, just remember that we're all born with spontaneity and creativity. So let's everyone pull our daisies.
So that's what it's like to be spontaneous. I've been wondering all these years.
Sometimes it's also possible to overdo it.
Yeah.
And that's why the greatest 20th century, past 20th century's invention in the age of technocracy is the eraser and the wastebasket. But you can do things spontaneously, and then if you get something good out of that, you can use a little of that when you're sitting down in that chair trying to write a symphony or a book or a novel or a letter, and take the little tidbit that might be of use. And if nothing's of use, at least take the good experience to give you energy, not to have the self-indulgence time to have writer's block.
Right.
All right, everybody, we are back. David Amram coming at us with the jam. So cool, you think you were locked inside a freezer at a Smucker's factory. David, that was amazing. Welcome to part 2. I will let you take it away for this part. I believe your mic is off, David.
Hi, I just want to thank everyone. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Pamela. And thank all of you for coming and staying. I would thought perhaps after that reading and the 13 minutes. Oh, the lyrics for the original song, which I forgot to mention, were by Jack Kerouac, his road buddy, Neil Cassidy, and the poet Allen Ginsberg. And all the other stuff that I made up was not part of the original. But when we did the film Pull My Daisy, Jack saw our massacring of his beautiful play, which I never saw until about 2 or 3 years ago, which was never done, and which was really quite interesting. And a fragment of that play was what we were supposed to do in the film, instead of which we had 52 hours of stoned out partying. And a fellow named Prochnik, who was a wonderful editor and a friend of Robert Frank, who filmed it, cut it down to 29 minutes, and Jack spontaneously narrated the film, but they did want sort of a title song, so Alan and Jack and Neil had sort of a group poem that they'd written, and that was the lyrics, and they deserve credit because they were 3 brilliant guys. So if any of you would like to ask a question or make a comment, I would be delighted to try to give a short answer. I promise.
So yeah, for this part, everybody, you're on mute right now. So there should be a little function, if you are familiar with Zoom, where it is a little raise hand function. And we can go ahead and do that in order, if you guys wouldn't mind raising your hand whenever you have a question. And we will direct it over to David and you. So we open up the floor to all of you. Who's got a first question? I guess also physical raising of hand can work for those who are on camera as well. Let's see.
Could I request some people to ask me a question, because I know so many of the people there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I guess I could start off by a woman who is not far from where you guys are, who had one of the best radio shows I've ever been on. She did a Zoom show every day, and she's a terrific jazz singer in addition to everything else. And I really enjoyed hearing her music, which I wasn't aware of until after I did the show and asked her to please send it to me, and she was just wonderful. Her name is Kathy Siegel Garcia, and I could see her. Hi, Kathy. I can see you. Can you hear us okay? I see.
I will ask her to unmute right now and see if this will work.
Well, while Kathy is unmuting, I also saw a young man who's going to be our first guest next week. And I mentioned the scroll in the song. For those of you who don't know it, there was an amazing scroll that Jack used in 1951, because he was such a fast typer. He didn't want to have to keep changing pages, and he took Lucian Carr, who worked in a huge news agency, gave him some of those gigantic long scrolls that you can use for newscasting stuff, and he typed the whole On the Road Out, single space typing. Unbelievable. And the person who was chosen by James Irsay when Jack's scroll was auctioned paid $2.4 million for this literary treasure. And Mr. Irsay, instead of doing what would be a normal business person would do, which would be to lock it up in a safe for 20 years and then sell it for 3 times as much, decided he wanted everyone in the world to be able to see that as much as possible physically. But he realized it had to be rolled, unrolled, the temperature, it had to be taken care of or it would disintegrate. So he chose the best person, called a conservator, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, to do that. And that person is going to be our first guest next week. And he's here tonight. So if I could ask, please, if Mr. Jim Canary could say something or anything, and we'll all listen and learn.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, David.
Hi.
It's great to hear you and see you. Yeah, I look forward to talking with you next week, and who knows what we'll talk about, right? It'll come about.
Exactly.
I remember that that time we were at the British Library with the scroll, and I thought, well, I shouldn't really put a lot of effort into writing anything for my introduction. I should be spontaneous. Well, it was 2 minutes, 3 minutes before I was walking in the library, and I still didn't know what I was going to say. And then this vision came to me, this swirling vision of all these people, and Jack being there amidst all of these wonderful writers, and the Diamond Sutra, which is held at the British Library. And I was just in this swoon, and I came in with that Tibetan phrase in my mind, and I just said that and welcomed everyone. The phrase is Nangwa Tamche Milam Chindu, which means all appearances are the nature of the dream. And it was a dream that Jack would be displayed there among such wonderful writers, and that everyone there could share in that dream. And then you just kicked right in with the music there. It was wonderful. I'll never forget that moment.
And I remember too, because for all of you who are listening and watching, Jack didn't speak English until he was almost 7 years old. And he loved the classics of English speaking literature as well as French literature and Japanese and Chinese literature and all the great authors and painters and poets and musicians of the world. And there, his original manuscript for On the Road, which Jim Canary lovingly brought with him and guarded, was sitting not too far away from the King George Old Library, and works of Shakespeare, Beowulf, Thackeray, Emily Bronte, all these great pieces, original manuscripts. He was right with them, not in the beat cellar of branded Slopolaville, but transcending what was begrudgingly bestowed upon him as the king of the beat generation, which he never thought he was. And there he was there with great authors of the English language, which is something that I guess every writer who writes in English dreams of, and which he certainly never expected would happen during his lifetime when he got so much abuse and was just considered to be a slob fast typist by most of the littérateurs of the time and a lot of other people. But fortunately, that wasn't the case with today's readers and a lot of us who were the day before yesterday's readers, but were outnumbered by people who didn't read anything or were influenced. And it was so great without it. So I only mentioned to the British audience before we played, imagine what it would be like from someone from Lowell, Massachusetts that didn't speak English till he was 6 to have his work here. And they all understood that. And all those people brought up in London and the environment all appreciated his work. And Jim, if you could say something about the scroll, because seeing it, and I remember we did ones in Indiana, and every time I've seen it, it's like some magical thing. It's like this huge, it's so long. How long is that? But you see this.
It's just under 120 feet, but the very end of it was eaten by a dog. Lucian Carr's dog Potchki ate the end of it. So we really don't know quite how long it truly was, but it was really only about 7 or 8 pages, I think, of the novel at the end that are missing. But it's written, Jack wrote in pencil on there, eaten by Potchki, a dog.
Is that where the excuse, the dog ate my homework, originated from?
It very well could be. But we had a break I work at a rare book library, and people bring in sweets and things, and there was this one thing they brought in was called Potchki. It was this sweet thing. So I thought Lucian Carr must have named his dog, must have been a very sweet Cocker Spaniel. He named it Potchki, So, but yeah, it's about 120, a little short of 120 feet. And Jim had a display case built that is modular, so it can exhibit the entire length of it, which has only been done a few times. It was in the exhibit of the Beats at Pompidou Center, and they built their own case. It was cheaper than shipping this one over. But that was a wonderful exhibition, probably one of the greatest exhibitions of the Beat writers. And then that moved on to ZKM in Karlsruhe, Germany, and also displayed the entire full length. So it's pretty incredible to see the entire length of it.
And we're really honored, Jim, that you could come and be in the very first show. And there's so many other people. I mentioned Kathy. I don't know if Kathy Sagel Garcia, I gave a glowing introduction, but at that point.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, great, you're there.
I missed that part. Damn.
Oh, okay. Well, you know who you are. I told everyone else what an extraordinary show you had, and you were also a great singer. And now you were finally taking some time to go back and do your music and your wonderful recordings. And what a joy it was to be in your program.
Oh yeah.
Thank you
You're
for all
welcome.
you've done and
Thank you.
continue to do, not only for your own stellar work, but for music.
Thanks, David. But yeah, it was totally my honor to meet you and to have you speak on the show. And I know Joyce is here. She's a big fan. And and yeah, just so wonderful. And I can tell that your purpose is to inspire people to be creative. And I think you do that like falling off a log. It's like, you know, that is just totally what you do. This is amazing. I love this show and the writing and the speaking, the singing. I love your singing.
Oh, thank you. Well, I never dared to sing until recently. And then I played with so many terrific singers, and I would just sing at parties and make up dumb songs. And I said, well, okay, I can just try what you're supposed to do in life to work within your limitations. So I always thought about Leonard Cohen, who's so magnificent. My Lord, what a writer and songwriter. And he has about a 1 octave range, but so what? It was perfect. And the great Bobby Hackett, the trumpet player, who's one of the immortals in music, finally they advertised his trumpet. They said, Bobby Hackett's trumpet in glorious tradition, and the upper octave is brand new. And he could play up there, but he never bothered to because he found out the great register that he could play in. So it wasn't, his limitations were self-imposed. But I think everybody can do something within their limitations. And that's one of the things that I guess we spend our life learning is to work within those limitations. And then when you do that, to try to tell a story. And Stan Getz said the most wonderful thing. He said, well, he said, people say, you know, I'm not original stylist or this or that. I said, but every note that I've ever played, I've meant. And the famous one that Lester Young told when the saxophone player, Prez, because he was called the president of beauty, they said, he called himself Prez as well as everyone else. So the saxophone player said to him, to Lester Young, he said, Prez, I'd like to play for you. And Lester Young said, Prez would love to hear Prez play for Prez. So he sat down in his elegant suit. He was always so gracious and such a consummate gentleman. And the guy played, almost tore the building down, playing Arnold Schoenberg's greatest outtakes, the bombing of Hiroshima, the flight of the bumblebee. And after all that was done, Lester Young said very graciously, that was most impressive. Now I'd like to hear your story. And that's really the whole thing, I think, in everything. So I've written 2 operas. I wish I could sing in the chorus in one of them, but as they say in The Sopranos, forget about it. And I'm playing the French horn. I used to play the Brahms horn trio. I wouldn't dare desecrate Brahms by doing it now because I'm not able to unless I gave up everything else for 5 years and practiced, maybe could. But you have to realize what you can do and what you can't do. That's just for me, that's for everybody. And that's a hard thing.
Yeah.
Because we're all trained, you know, to be egomaniacs, conquer the world, dump on everybody and run out of town with the money before we get caught. And that's fine. But there's another way, which is to try to go for excellence, be for real, do your best, have standards. And as they say when you play in a symphony, when in doubt, leave it out.
That's cool. I was interviewing Carmen Bradford the other day, you know, who's the daughter of Bobby Bradford and Melba
yeah.
Joyce. She's a lovely person. And she said when she performs, either studio or live, she always leaves room for God to be there. And that was just a great idea. It really actually does speak to what you're talking about, you know. Because
Yeah.
when you don't fill up the whole space with your ego, there's something there's something else that can happen.
Well, Kathy, I sure thank you for everything you do, and thank you for watching. And there's many terrific people that I know but one of them I played at her college in 1970. That was a few weeks ago. And I still am in touch with two or three of the people who were there. And she's a wonderful singer, songwriter, journalist, and does a lot of work in Portland, Oregon, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Joyce, you could say a few words about that.
Hi, David. Seattle.
Oh, excuse me. I'm glad I asked you a question.
Yes. Well, it's great to see you, and I'm excited about you reading from your book. And I saw that scroll at the New York Public Library, and it was pretty impressive way back when it was on display there. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. And yeah, well, I just remember meeting you a long, long time ago and visiting you in your amazing skylit apartment on 6th Avenue above the clog shop. I think that was the clog shop that was underneath your place. Was that there then? Remember there
Oh,
was
yes.
a clog store for like ever and ever and ever.
Yeah,
And I just remember your incredible skylight that you had with multi panes. And, just like bringing all this light, and it was the classic Greenwich Village apartment. And it was just the most, just your background. It was just like amazing for me as a young person to sort of be around someone who was part of jazz and beat life and classical life. And just, I really just was wowed by and admiring of you and your energy.
Well, I'm a recipient of the blessings I was lucky enough, and still am lucky enough, to receive from others. And I only say that because it's true, and and the rewards for trying to be open enough and be able to say please and thank you to everybody that crosses your path enables you to continue to be educated as long as you're inhaling and exhaling. And I have 7 honorary doctorates, but my education came from and still comes from being a full-time freshman in the University of Hangoutology, because it's amazing. Every person who crosses your path can teach you a lesson. And it's hard to remember that. And I think we're kind of discouraged, especially in basic New York society, when I was also a member of living there in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, where there's supposed to be those who can, above you, who can help you to climb out of your miserable state and be less of a nobody. So when I went to Lukenbach, Texas, the mayor, Hondo Crouch, this crazy guy, had a sign, Lukenbach, Texas, population 7. And underneath it said, everybody is somebody in Lukenbach. So I always say that when someone refers to someone as a nobody, I said, there is no such thing. Everybody is somebody. And I tell them about Hondo Crouch. And I only say that because we're trained to think, don't be with no losers. And actually, everybody can teach you a lesson. And life is precious, and everyone has an ethnicity or ethnicities, a heritage, a family, a story, and they're all precious and all valuable. And when you see that, then you can enjoy every moment of life and be of some value, at least as a human being, or you can try to be. So that's what I learned at the time I met you. I was already on that trajectory, and Jack Kerouac was really that way, which is why he got so much static, because as a 35-year-old no good Nick, as we used to say, who only had one book that sold 1,200 copies. He was considered to be, like myself, a total nobody at that time. And in spite of that, he continued writing. He'd written, I think, 11 books, and suddenly he became, overnight, he became a worldwide celebrity. And that's the last thing he had in mind. He used to say when we were walking down the streets, I'm an author. He had that Lowell accent. I'm an author, Davy. I'm a writer. I'm an author. And this was something that upset him because he was very shy. And rather than searching, groveling, and knocking everybody over to get more famous, he was trying to become a better writer and hoped someone would read his books. And of course, now his dream is fulfilled because, sure enough, people all over the world are reading his books. And I just say that to all of you because he died with $83 and out of fashion, the worst crime in America you can commit, to fall out of fashion. So I mean, fashion's great. The hemlines go up and the hemlines go down. And they say in the garment district, you can't make a mink out of a skunk. But actually, that's our gig in life, to take what people would consider to be worthless and show the beauty part of it.
Well, David, I remember visiting you, as time passed, and having dinner with you and Laura Lee and your three beautiful children who were tiny and all had beautiful curly hair. And now they're all beautiful adults who are musicians. And it's a very nice memory. I still remember that very clearly.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'd like, if I could introduce a wonderful young woman. She still has curly hair, but now that she's 41 years old, she's adorable, but more mature. And without her and Pamela and Anthony, I would probably be sitting in my chair, wondering if anybody would not only ever read my book, but whether it would even come out of the warehouse with all the other millions of books that aren't read either. So I'd like to introduce a very good friend of mine I've known since she was born. Singer, songwriter, and helpful
Hi,
to aging father, Alana.
I'm upstairs right
Oh,
now.
Alana.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Okay.
I'm zooming in from upstairs.
And
Can you hear me, Dad? It works. Good. Anyways, it's so beautiful. I'm glad you all could be there. I'm so glad my pops can perform and do what he's supposed to be doing due to technology. So thank you, Pamela and Anthony, for making this happen. And I have to say, sitting by watching my dad at 89 learn Zoom and GarageBand and all these things to be able to do the show was really inspiring, because I like to complain, like, I don't know how to work this. And then I'm like, wait a second. So.
Well, I thank you, Alana, for helping out and for all the music you're writing and all the terrific things that you do, and for being such a wonderful person, and for you and your sister and brother to put up with me. That's all any parent could dream of, and that's the great blessing in life, having a family, because everything else can disappear in 15 seconds and often does. But the family, man, that's for keeps. So if you're a parent or a child or a sister or a brother or anything, as they say in the vernacular, you gots to be cool and considerate and loving. And there's another young person that I met who I see, and now has a terrific radio program on one of our great radio stations in New York, but he's a wonderful technical engineer. He helps out Clearwater Festival. He's someone who loves folkloric music, all musics, and he's given a lot to New York City and every musician who's worked with him. A soothing and encouraging, supportive, skilled person in a sea of sometimes terrifyingly bad vibes. He cools everything out Mr. Jeremy Rayner.
Wow. Hi, David. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Wow. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, I work at WFUV in the Bronx, working from home as everybody else is, hopefully. And I'm so happy to be here and happy that you're doing this, David. This is really wonderful.
Well, it's just a treat. And my hope is that it will get other people to become aware of Jack and all the people in that generation. And in your, as you're doing on your radio show with your generation, to share the gifts of all the people in your generation and encourage them to continue what they're doing and not to be dissuaded by the difficulty. And I always tell people when they say, "You're ahead of your time," I said, "No, I was right on time and still trying to be," and inspired by Charlie Parker saying, "Now's the time." And sometimes if it takes a while to remember that Moses was in the desert 40 years. So if you're waiting around, you're right on schedule.
That's very true. When you're waiting around, you're always on schedule, really, because you're on your own schedule. So David, I don't know if you are able to see this at the moment, but Dr. Harrison actually posted something in the chat section of Zoom, which is going to be on your right-hand side. Alana, if you happen to be near your father, would you mind helping him to open up that little chat box? I think it'd be really cool to read what Dr. Harrison has to say to everybody and to you.
Is it possible? Can he come on camera, or did he probably?
That's part of his letters. He doesn't have audio visual at the moment that he's able to access. So he left us a little written message in the chat section.
Nice. Oh, isn't that nice? Oh,
I guess
good.
everybody can read it.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, oh, terrific. And then, Doug just sent it. So I should say something to a person I've known for years when he managed Odetta and so many. If I went into all the people that he worked with, from Chuck Berry up until the present, the computers would explode. But he's been a great friend and someone we all admire. And he's been a colossal help to me in trying to learn how to grow up and do stuff more effective. And Doug, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for music long before I met you. And also, Doug made an amazing movie about how the early rock and rollers came to Russia and saved the liberty that we all crave by helping to knock down the wall, and how these great musicians from Latvia, some of them died trying to have that music heard when they had the Iron Curtain, and actually used that music to bring liberty and a desire for a new world to millions of people that never would have dared to think that way otherwise. So Doug, could you say a few, anything? And you have to put the microphone on. Or
Unmute.
there.
Can you now hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, this has been an adventure because as Alana said, having someone who's going to be 90 years old in a month or two learning all this technology was way beyond my expertise. And you and Alana did an amazing job. And I've seen you changed the background behind you. You put up new pictures. You somehow got rid of the air conditioner. And you two you're a great team. You've done a great job. And Alana, you also made your dad looks no older than 79 tonight.
That's his work.
That's all his own work. Whoops, sorry.
But I can't wait till next week. It's great to see all of you. And Anthony, are we?
Well, there's some, is Regina, I see names of people, but I can't see their face. Does that mean they were there?
Yeah.
They're there. They're just not.
Yeah.
What? Oh, because there's the president of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. That's the only, I worked for them since 1994, and all of their presidents are still there and still beloved. And we wish that Judith Bissett could have run for office. And since we promised not to discuss politics, we'll spare you that. But she's the kind of president we all appreciate because she really cares. And in the case of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac, she's opened up the door to have everyone feel at home in his hometown and made it into an amazing hometown event. And I don't know if she is still there or not. But if she's not, on her behalf, I would just say, if you get a chance to visit Lowell Celebrates Kerouac, you'll be in for the time of your life. It's usually the first, or I think first or second weekend in October, so there's still a way off because this year they had to do it. They're going to do it online. So many things are done, but that's an amazing festival, and you actually get to see and be in the town that he's from. And my greatest time was when I was with the kids, and we stopped because it's so hard. There's so many one-way streets, and I was lost. So someone said, well, you go over here, and then you go there, and then you make a left. You can't make a left turn anymore, but you go over that. He kept talking. And Adira, Alana's, and he had on a flannel shirt, like lumberjack style. Alana's sister said, Daddy, that guy's a Kerouac wannabe. Because she'd seen all the videos of Jack, with his shirt on talking. I said, no, I said, that's the way people talk and dress in Lowell. And when he got to be a world famous cat, instead of wearing a tweed coat with patches on his sleeve and adopting a fake English accent, and he just stayed the same person that he was before he became famous, which shocked a lot of people because they thought he was betraying his newfound station in life. And his station in life was just keeping it for real. But Lowell is still pretty much the same town as when he was there, and it's just so beautiful that when you visit there, you see all the terrific things, and you realize he didn't put Lowell on the map. Lowell gave him something because there's just something about that place. And that in turn makes you appreciate a lot of places that are off the grid of the New York Times hippest 7 places in the world to be, which is fine too, but there's a lot of other places. And Lowell's one of them that really, so if you like Jack's work, or you just want to be in a New England town that still has some of its own character, it's quite amazing. They have a wonderful high school program that they give of called Celebrating Jack Kerouac. And most of the kids, folks, now the preponderance come from Nicaragua, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And most of their families don't speak English at home, just as Jack's didn't, for the most part, at home. And yet they're all writing poetry. They have about 60 or 70 kids all come and read their poetry and cheer each other on. They're supportive instead of having the hate-filled competitive, I'm a poet and you're not, all that stuff. They're out there eating each other's work up and congratulating each other. And I said to the principal, it wouldn't be appropriate to say to the students, but when I went to high school and when Jack was in high school, he was 8 years older than me, but during that time, if you even carried a copy of Walt Whitman under your arm, you get beaten up. And here was the whole high school coming out and cheering on their own classmates who were writing poetry. It's a pretty beautiful thing to see. And Lowell, and they have a big picture of Jack and his football buddy, Johnny Cumansalis, who died during World War II. And it's kind of a wonderful glance at a time that seems to be past. And I just recommend that. And Judith Bassett is their president. And she acts like a real president, I guess like a real president's supposed to, because she makes you feel welcome.
Now, David, I believe you said you were looking for Regina, correct?
Well, I'm here.
We
I'm
have
right
Regina
here.
on audio.
Oh, great.
Right. Purely on audio, but I am thrilled to see everyone here. This was a great night. I enjoyed the reading and enjoyed the music and enjoyed the chat. And I'm really looking forward to more. And I'd like to say that I've had many, many experiences with David Amram, but one of my earliest experiences with him was when I had a radio show on WBAI. And it's kind of funny that he mentioned that he wouldn't just run on and on and on. But what happened in that show was that I asked one question and maybe 2 hours later, he was still talking. And I remember coming out of the room and somebody said to me, you know, Regina, you could interrupt. I didn't dare.
Remember, that was your first show.
It was my first show. I had the perfect guest.
You said, I'm terrified. I say, man, just do whatever you want to do. And so I kept looking up to see, but you were wonderful. And then Regina wrote this beautiful collection of Jack Kerouac's haikus. And we were told by the person who ran it, don't say anything. Just play the music you're assigned to do and don't say anything to everybody. So when it was my turn, I said, ladies and gentlemen, without the person who's here who got this book not only edited but published now in its third printing, all of us would be at home watching CNN. So we really should thank her for what she did for Jack Kerouac's work and for the haiku art itself. Please stand up so you can be acknowledged, Regina Weinreich. And she stood up and everybody cheered and applauded. Then I invited her to come up on the stage and they cheered for about 5 minutes. And I only mention that because sometimes people engage you, and then once you've done something, you're not only discarded, but they wish you weren't around. So it was so beautiful to see you bypass that, and all the people who'd come to hear and know about Jack's haikus. That was just a very, very beautiful moment. And what you did was not only well deserved, but still appreciated. And now a lot of people who want to write that kind of poetry feel that they have a place in today's world. And everyone else reading those can go and see the original haiku writers and Asian writers and all of that. And you opened up a door by that wonderful book. Not to mention all the other courses that you've taught, and you're reading Kerouac with us so many times, and you're coming to Lowell Celebrates Kerouac and all the other stuff you do. So you're really appreciated by a whole bunch of people, and I'm glad everyone tonight could see and know Regina Weinreich.
Well, thank you, David. I really appreciate your mentioning that, but I want to say something about Lowell. Because I'm happy you mentioned Lowell. Kerouac was one of the handsomest writers ever. And it seems to me that a beautiful picture or a statue of Kerouac would have been a perfect way to remember him in Lowell. But they did a beautiful job there, putting up the thing that he cared about most in the world, which were his words. And all of the beautiful, those slabs of, I guess, granite with excerpts from Kerouac's writing, are, in my opinion, the most beautiful tribute to a writer I've ever seen. So Lowell really did a good job.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I also want to thank Pamela, because she told me after I was doing my reading, implied that seeing the top of someone's head for 40 minutes wasn't that exciting, and maybe I should look up. So I honestly think without her advice as not only a distinguished playwright and a screenwriter and an actress in many wonderful films, and made a terrific film of her own that I'm sure you're all going to see someday about New York in the 80s, pretty extraordinary. She was also nice enough to coach someone who's a neophyte in kindergarten basic 101 reading aloud. And that was a terrific thing. And Pamela, we all thank you. Without her and Anthony, this never would have happened. And now
I think I'm on mic now. So David, I appreciate your send off, but some of those self-deprecating remarks are not exactly what I said. I said, you're absolutely fabulous no matter what you do. And having you read your book live and getting to see you do it is extraordinary. And for us to all be able to share that and come live on Zoom and be present with you is absolutely beautiful.
Well, I think I did it a lot better than I ever would have if you hadn't suggested maybe to try to do it better. And I thank you for that, and hope everyone else, if you're doing anything, someone that you admire makes a suggestion, even if it's hurtful, pay attention, because maybe you can do it better. And we all need all the help we can get. Frank McCourt told me that when he wrote a nice blurb for this book, and I said, Frank, there was one part I had to cut out, and I went into all that stuff. I said, it killed me, but I figured the editor's real good. And he said, quote, David, he said, Kurt Vonnegut and Norman Mailer, they don't need much editing. But for mere mortals like us, we can use all the help we can get. And that's after he had a hit book out for 2 years. He said that. And he was a high school teacher when I met him at his brother's bar, which I played at, a wonderful, brilliant, fantastic cat and a wonderful writer. But he said, he kept it for real, and he understood that we're all privy to getting better if we're lucky enough to be around someone who can give us some advice. I only mention that so for all of you, if you're given a suggestion, try to think about it, and you can do better. Because I felt I did better tonight than I've ever done, and I wouldn't have dared to do that if you hadn't suggested. So I really thank you for that.
David,
you're very good at it. Yes, you're good at it. And I must say, it's extraordinary to be online with you and also with other luminaries in your life. And also that's part of a certain legacy that I've been researching for many years. So to be part of conversation that has David Amram, Jack Kerouac, Joyce Johnson, Lowell, James Canary, Doug Yeager, Anthony Demarbier, and other people that are online is so significant and meaningful to me in the infinite galactic Diamond Sutra and great spirit of this universe that you play such a big part of with your music and your written word. I feel really blessed and honored to know you and be here today.
If I could just mention that Murray Weinstock, the keyboard player in the Loving Spoonful band, has been here the whole night. He just wrote on chat.
Oh, is Murray's? Oh,
so cool.
Can Murray say something too? Because
Murray, if you're still there.
I am here.
I didn't see
Are
you.
you there? I am so thrilled to be on this maiden voyage with you guys. It was just terrific to hear you, and so it's like music, you know. Your talking is just like music, and you know, having grown up in Paterson, New Jersey, at around 1962, I started reading, you know, on the road, and I've just like carried it around to high school with me, with this other guy, and we used to really dig it. And so this is a thrill to hear you, you know, just jam with it. I really appreciate it, David.
Love your book.
Love your book, man.
And Murray's a heck of a piano player. Some of you hadn't had the pleasure of hearing him or playing with him. And when I met him, man, it must have been almost 50 years ago. You were a killer player then. And the last time we saw each other at the Folk Alliance, we were jamming out. And a lot of the younger people, 18, 19-year-olds, were shocked to see two, I wouldn't say old people, but older people.
Senior people.
And enjoying them. They were shocked by that. I said, well, man, that's the way we were brought up to be. Or if we weren't brought up to be that way, we became that way by being around people who were that way. And
that's what jazz is all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the joy of it all.
Yeah.
And there's one other person, Murray, you might probably know him. He works now for a huge, I won't say WIT because I don't want you to get flooded with requests, but he's someone who has helped out. And his job now at this gigantic rights organization is to help out young musicians, young songwriters, young singers, young people to feel that they dare put their toe into the water, that they dare be part of it, and helps them to do that. And his name is Mr. Michael Spudik.
Yeah.
Nicknamed Spooty.
Yeah.
And I can see his beautiful portrait, but I don't know if I see a picture of him. Michael, are you still there?
See, David, I still feel like I'm one of those young writers.
David, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. As always, you're as gracious and kind, and I really appreciate those words. Tonight was so inspiring and so unique. What you do is something that is treasured by creators and people who may not have that creative spirit and talent, but you know, you're the sustenance of this planet. What you do and what you represent for this country, for our culture. It's just an honor to be in this room with you, this virtual room.
Well, thank you. And I guess all of us, you know, can try to do what you can do and what we all can do, which is even if we can encourage one person in their lifetime to feel worthy and to feel that they've got something to contribute, then when they're told by 10,000 people to go shove it, they can always say, well, the guy who plays drums with me now, I met when he was 15 years old. And he came up on his father's clam boat. We were playing out from Bayport. We were playing out of Fire Island at a church fundraiser for this church that's out there. And he had a little xylophone. And he said, can I sit in with you guys? And we said, sure. And Pepper Adams, the master saxophone player, was with us. And his high school buddy, Elvin Jones, who was John Coltrane's drummer, like a scarifyingly great drummer, said he wanted to come out to the beach with Pepper. I said, oh, great. So Elvis said, yeah, man, come on and play. So after he was done playing his little xylophone, he said, hey, kid, you sound great, man. So when Kevin went back and his high school band director, told him, don't ever think about being a musician, he said years later, he said, when Elvin Jones told me I was okay, he said, that gave me that spark to dare to do what he's been doing ever since. Now he's like colossal. But all of us have that ability to put, as Dizzy Gillespie said, to put something back into the pot. And that's a wonderful thing that we can all do. And you don't have to join any political organization or a cult or pay dues. It doesn't cost anything. And it's priceless. It's not worthless because it's free. It's priceless.
Well said.
Amazing, amazing. So it is 8 o'clock, everybody. So I'm going to do the little 8 o'clock bongo, which means that we are going to be wrapping up this week's session. Thank you all so much for coming on. This has been amazing. We're going to be doing this every week at the same time, 6 to 8 Pacific, 9 to 11 Eastern time. And we'll be sending out, invites every week. You have the Zoom link right now. So this is going to be the weekly same meeting. If you want to come on anytime in the future and have more chats with David. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, as well as Facebook Live. So should you just want to catch the show one week, go ahead and check out our YouTube, and we will be on there every week at the same time, and tell all your friends. And we have a special little playoff. David, I unfortunately cut off his audio at the beginning, but he's going to play a little improvisational send-off for us. And Pamela, do you have any last things to say, or Doug? I open the floor to you.
Thank you all.
I believe you're muted, Pamela.
Muted, Pamela.
Oh, well, I was reading.
So what? David's supposed to play something. Okay.
George Bush said, "Read my lips." So Pamela, I'm reading your lips. She's thanking everyone. I thank all of you too. Hope you can come back again. Stay beatific. Stay creative. Wash your hands. And I'm going to put my mask back on so my own hot air doesn't ruin the atmosphere. And this is my Chinese Hulu Sai. Goodbye. Bye, you all.
Bye, David.